In this video, we will introduce some good habits in organization and documentation of a research project. Organizing and documenting your project well is not technically difficult to do, especially if you do it from the beginning. But organization and documentation can make an enormous difference in making your project easier to work on for yourself, reducing the chances that you'll make mistakes along the way, and for those who want to understand and perhaps reuse your project. Tip 1. Save your project in a single folder. Start with your project in a single folder. Everything that relates to your project will be inside this folder. This will make your project portable and cohesive, and will make it easy for someone else to make sense of it. This is a habit that applies to projects anywhere, but particularly in research projects, it contributes to their reproducibility, which is of course a vital component of good science. The term research compendium has been coined to refer to a container for different elements that make up the research presentation. Of course, the paper or report itself, but also the data, and the code that's used to analyze the data and generate the results. Tip 2. Devise a logical system of subfolders. Make a logical system of subfolders looking at what is standard in the field. There is no one-size-fits-all, but this can be a good structure for a research project. Or this. Make sure you have folders separate for data, for documentation, and, for example, for your figures. Make sure you structure your subfolders in a logical way. Don't be afraid to make sub-sub and sub-sub-sub folders, so long as it's logical. Especially when you are working with code or tools that generate content automatically, it is important to separate the content that is generated automatically from the content that you yourself are writing. It's also really important to separate read-only content, like data, from the rest. Raw data should never be meddled with. The base of your folder system, the main folder at the highest level of your project, is called the root. This is an important reference point of your project. It contains the main files that are required to understand the project, as well as the main subfolders. Tip 3. Introduce the project, or any subfolder, in a README. Especially on higher levels, it's recommended that each folder contains a description or a README file that describes the content of that folder. There are certain things that you can put in that README file. A good thing to start with is always to ask yourself, what if, in 1 year time, you see this folder again? What information do you need to understand it fully? With almost everything we are going to show you today, you yourself are the most likely to benefit from a good project structure, good documentation, and much more. Keep this in mind. Other content that you can put in a README, aside from a general overview of the project, is, for example, an explanation of abbreviations used, the expected files and folders in your project, and their purpose, names of contributors and their roles, and of course any links or references to important sources. Tip 4. Use interoperable file types. Using Excel may be great for now, with all its bells and whistles, but what if you leave your position and are no longer able to pay for the software? Can you still access your own data? What if someone who wants to reuse your project does not have access to Excel? What happens to the file in 10 years' time? Would you feel confident now that you can access and successfully read an Excel file from 10 years ago? Instead, we recommend that you save data in a format that will work with Excel, but is not dependent on the software to be read. This format, a CSV file, it takes the form of a table where items in different columns are separated by commas or other characters, like semicolons. The data is stored in plain text, and this allows it to be read by many different types of software, including a plain text editor. And importantly, a CSV file will likely outlive you. For almost any proprietary file type, there's an interoperable alternative. Instead of a Word document, you can save your text as a TXT file, perhaps formatted using Markdown. Information is ideally stored as plain text, but an interoperable file format can be different. The important thing is that it can be used by diverse platforms and applications and does not require paid software to be accessible. Tip 5. Use descriptive and logical file names. File names themselves can be important documentation. A file name, first of all, is a description of the file that is tightly connected to that file. File names can be used to find the right data quickly amidst a jumble of files, or they can be used to identify the content of a stray file. Naming a file right is therefore important. There are 3 main considerations to make. File names should first of all be machine readable. This means using a Latin alphabet with consistent capitalization and no spaces or strange characters. When a file name contains important information about the content of that file, it can be used to quickly retrieve that file inside your system. A file name does not need to be short, but words should never be separated by spaces. Instead, use underscores, snake case, hyphens, kebab case, or consistent capitalization, camel case, to separate elements. Using hyphens or underscores has the added advantage that it is easy to separate elements automatically based on the patterns found in a name. Most importantly, though, file names should be intelligible for a human. That means that they should contain certain information that identifies the content of that file for you, or ideally, for another person. Jenny Bryan, who gave an excellent talk about this, gave this example to drive that point home. What file names would you rather see at 3 a.m. before a deadline? Finally, file names will be important when you want to sort your files. Therefore, make sure that file names start with the most general descriptor of the file content. For example, when you are including a date in your file, and you probably should, start with the year, then the month, and then the day. This will make sure that when you are sorting your files, you will sort them chronologically, and not all the October files with the other October files, for instance. It also prevents any confusion with date notation in different parts of the world. Tip 6. Make your data tidy. An important starting point for data analysis is to have clean data. But data can not only be clean, it can also be tidy. Tidy is a special term. It is defined as follows. Each variable is a column, and it contains values. Each observation is its own row, and each cell contains a single measurement. It may be logical to collect observations like this. On each individual plant, you perform several measurements and collect them in a single row. In this example, however, you will see that data, namely the kind of features you were measuring, are hiding as column names, and in every row, multiple observations are recorded. That same data can be put in a tidy format. No data is lost here, though it looks different. The tidy format standardizes the structure of the data, making it more straightforward to interpret and to run analyses on. To summarize our tips, please save your project in a single folder, devise a logical system of subfolders, introduce your project in a README file, use interoperable file types, use descriptive and logical file names, and be sure to make your data tidy.